it's everyone in this room. We're a community that gathers every weeknight. It's 100% volunteer run, so like having Microsoft support us in terms of any partnership tonight. And from the people who set up the screens and order the pizza, it's all volunteer run. I can't even call it a nonprofit because it's not. It's the level below, beside that one, grassroots. And yeah, it's just anybody in Toronto coming together to talk about all things making more livable cities.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
Good. I'm glad. It's nice to see you guys. I'm very glad to be here and finally check out Civic Toronto. I've been wanting to do so for a while. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about interactive civic engagement. But first, I'll just talk a little bit about myself so you guys know me a little bit better. And so, hello Civic Tech. My name is Jordan Sparks. I am a multimedia artist, designer, technician, and educator, which is a very long and great title to just describe that I do a lot of things: graphic design, 3D printing, video production, interactive art, video games, all sorts of different things, if you guys name it. I also do a lot of teaching and education work, and some people call me the friendly neighborhood Sparky Man. I graduated from Ryerson University with a Master of Arts in Media Production and a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Media. And I'm a developer and researcher of Game for Social Change. Some games I have made in that realm, such as the games Who Are You and Another. And I'm president of Shine Spark Entertainment, which is a new company I made this year aimed around creating creative content for social change. I work at the Royal Interior Museum with the Hand-Eye Society and a bunch of other freelance stuff, and I've previously worked with Ryerson University as well as spoken at Sheridan College. But that's enough about me. I was going to also make a land acknowledgement, but seeing as Civic Tech was kind enough to make their own, I'll just skip over it. I am grateful to have this opportunity to be on this territory. So our world is more connected than ever before. There are databases, systems, devices, many different technologies that connect us financially, politically, socially, and in many other different ways. And through technology, we have unlocked many different opportunities for both good and ill. Now, I'm sure the question of Civic Tech is, of course, how do we use that technology responsibly? And it's important that we always ask ourselves those questions. But I do want to ask everybody here a question to ponder. I don't want you to answer it, but I just want you to think of it. Can interactive experiences and systems become catalysts for social change? Now, I do want you to just ponder this, what that question means to you now, see if that changes over the course of this presentation, and just see what it means to you. But I do believe that there is a lot of untapped potential in interactivity in order to drive positive social change, especially where civic responsibilities and civic duties are involved. And I'd like to talk about that. Because our world is driven a lot by interactivity, and interactivity has changed our world in many ways, and sometimes in ways we don't even realize. There's very old-fashioned ways, such as Jeopardy! I'm sure everybody here has tried to guess the questions in Jeopardy, sometimes even with a friend or a family member. And even though that we are not a contestant on Jeopardy, unless you actually are, and are influencing what's going to happen, we do a format like this allows us a social experience to interact with each other in order to try to figure things out, try to compete to get to each other, try to understand things, and that is a way that interactive social experiences can actually sort of change our own lives and our own experiences. But let's go into how interactive technology has changed many other facets of our life. So stuff like Amazon, where we can use it to buy things online very easily through interactive web systems. Similarly with Google Maps, which is where when I looked up where this was, how I can find anywhere I want to go. Banking, which has gone from us giving cash to writing checks to putting in our cards and putting in a number to just now tapping. And our phones, which can now do all of those things plus more, and have us look at different news, communicate with different people, and it's important to sort of try to understand, even if it's hard to sort of realize it consciously, how interactivity has impacted our lives and how the growth of technology. A lot of technology has changed in order to lean toward interactivity and expression through user input, and through that, we can innovate and make a lot of different experiences that could engage us in many different ways. Even social media is a way that we have in order to change the way that we interact with people and as well as express ourselves. So, I asked a question to everybody. I want to ask an open question to everybody. What comes to mind when I say video games? What comes to mind, the first thing? Anybody?
Mario.
Mario?
Call of
Yeah.
Duty.
Call of Duty.
Nintendo.
All right. Nintendo, yeah. So video games elicit a lot of different reactions, but do they elicit the reaction of making a civic experience or an education experience?
No.
Not often, and that's what I want to touch on, because I believe that games, especially, are very capable of expressing a lot more than what is commonly thought of or understood, and it is a very unexplored sort of field for us to use it, especially in the realm of civic responsibility and technology. And I want to show you guys 2 tweets to think on. One is by an independent developer. If games are art, then we have to embrace the idea that they don't have to be fun. Art is not always fun. It covers a wide spectrum of emotions and concepts. And as somebody who does believe that games are an art form, especially an art form that encompasses many different art forms all at once, I believe that there is a wide spectrum of feeling, but not only in games, but in entertainment, that is often untapped and not always thought of. And while we do think of fun as sort of is this game fun? But do we ask ourselves, is the game engaging? There are many different ways to engage people. There is a romance novel can touch your heart. A horror movie can scare you. Those are all not necessarily fun, but they are engaging sort of different experiences. And because games allow for player input, they can be more expressive than any other media. And this tweet by, I think he's a Toronto developer, it's really depressing that it's very hard to make games about empathy and compassion. It's much easier to program a gun than a friend. Now, practically speaking, it totally is easier to program a gun than a friend, but it doesn't have the stuff as before. And why don't we make a game where friendship is a driving force in the gameplay? Why don't we make a game where we think of games where we have a conversation rather than just shooting everything that moves? And this is very important, especially because games use stories in order to make us a driving force in that story. We are not a passive observer. And while we often think of video games as jumping on Goombas and shooting people, what if we imagine other ways to interact with an interactive story? For example, video games have been toying with this for a while, such as Oregon Trail, where we have a game representing the American expansion in the 19th century for pioneers and people dying of dysentery. We also have the Assassin's Creed series, which is more of an action blockbuster kind of thing, but is actually based on a lot of research and history, and actually features a lot of historical events and places in order to within its story. And it's the role of how real-world events and circumstances shape video games has definitely changed as technology has evolved and interactivity in video games has advanced. But we can learn a lot from video games, and this is just a way that we can. Additionally, there are many different ways to interact in video games. While we often think of jumping on Goombas and shooting things, or many different action-oriented things when it comes to games, what about talking? Now, this is a sort of a standoff situation, but this is a game from a game called big game series called Mass Effect, where a lot of the game, while you do shoot things and run around in action sequences, a lot of the game is driven by interactive choices and dialogues, where you can, instead of shooting your way out of things, negotiate your way out of things, talk your way out of things, and those can actually be more engaging than the actual shooting itself, because you have to make decisions that determine the course of the story. Likewise, where we were talking about that tweet about programming a gun than a friend, this game series called Persona is an action game, but it actually has a system where it rewards you based off you essentially being a good friend to people. You have dialogue choices, you have conversations with people, and it rewards you for actually being essentially a good person to that friend and supporting them in many different ways. Ways that can translate to how we converse with people in real life. There are many different projects that deal with a wide range of interactive issues, many of which are not sort of well known or mainstream if if you're not very active in game scenes. For example, this one, which is it's called Hush, which is a game. It's a typing game. It's a very tense typing game where you play as a woman trying to quiet her baby in the Rwandan genocide, so that the soldiers don't actually find you. There is That Dragon Cancer, which is a game about a family dealing with, an autobiographical game about a family dealing with their son having terminal cancer. If you've never thought a game could make you cry, you should definitely play that game. And where we talk about today a lot of issues, especially down in the States with immigration and deportation, Iced is a game that uses interactive systems to talk about those issues. Not very well, but it's a way for it to do so. And there are many different ways for these sort of games to use interactive systems to talk about very different and sometimes even uncomfortable sort of life situations, social circumstances and issues, etc. And they do it in not always very action-oriented ways that are just as engaging as if you were shooting something. Now, this brings me to the topic, game for social change, which are games that aim to inform, enlighten, and/or affect the thoughts, opinions, and beliefs towards certain social and cultural issues in the society. And wow, that is a mouthful, but it's unfortunately the academic term I had to come up with for my thesis. But games for social change are able to different situations such as racism, sexism, and discrimination. Those aren't fun things, and when it comes to the experience you want to make, sometimes it's not a bad thing to make your player uncomfortable and make them actually think critically about the issue rather than just go, I'm going through this thing. But the important thing is that you engage them about the issue through the systems and then allow for a conversation to happen, both during the game as well as outside of it, because you want them to be thinking about something afterwards. And now comes to my project, PeoPoli, which is a working title I have to change, but it's based off the Canadian hashtags for politics that are on Twitter a lot. And PeoPoli is a game that uses interactive storytelling to teach people about Canadian politics. Players are thrust into an interactive story, not as a politician, but as a citizen. And how do they interact with these political events over a period of time that is fast-forwarded through the game. And when this game on paper, some people might have said it sounds really boring, but it allows the player to directly interact with political systems that happen within a story and how it might relate to them. They have the agency through the interactive systems to safely explore how does this issue impact me or these characters that I'm around. How does this sort of thing translate to my real life? Have there been events in this game that are actually sort of just like what's happening now? And explore those in a sort of safe environment that allows them to ask questions, to interact with different things, to try things multiple times and see what happens. The game is also designed to be a 3D point-and-click adventure style game that uses interactive conversations, point-and-click mechanics, and other different systems in order to allow for a game experience where they are able to explore those sort of themes. Choice is allowing them the choice to do so makes it so that if they want to sort of translate the actions that they do in the game to actual real life, they can. Now, PeoPoli currently looks like this. This is the Twine prototype that I made with funding by Ontario Creates by myself and a writer named Yash Kulkarni. And we made a point-and-click text adventure version as our interactive prototype in order to demonstrate the concept of our game, to demonstrate how PeoPoli would work and how the story would represent political and social issues. Now, this version of the game is actually up online for people to play. It goes about 2 levels in before stopping, and you do have the option to fill out a survey to report on your experience and help us with development as well. But it is on my website, and I'll provide the link later. What I want PeoPoli to end up looking like is this. This is a test little demonstration of the point-and-click mechanics and how the player would interact with different objects and eventually information when it comes to the full version, which is going to be a 3D game developed in Unity 3D. Right now, we are just we're just looking for further funding for this stage of the project. We just finished pre-production, which was the Twine prototype. So I often get asked, why would I make a game like this? Why would I make a game about politics, or especially about teaching politics to people? And it's because I believe our world is in danger, because politics affects so many things in our lives, and there's many different things that are decided by people in power. But the people in power get selected by the chosen few, because many people don't vote. And that has been a constant issue because voter engagement has been on the decline for a while. There are many different reasons for that. One is that our education system just does not address civics very little, if at all. Ontario is the only province, as far as I know, that actually has a mandatory public civics course, and as somebody who has gone through that civics course, it is both short and kind of a joke, because even if you have a teacher who is very passionate about the subject like I did, they are not given the time or the resources to really educate youth with the knowledge they really need to know when they grow up and become active citizens. And that leads to a lot of less civic engagement and understanding as they go into adulthood. There's many people I know who are very sort of skittish about politics or civic duties because they just don't know. They were never taught, and it scares them. And I don't blame them. Politics is meant to be inaccessible. There's a lot of barriers in terms of various information, very complex languages and terms, and very different sort of information that is not openly accessible to the public or very obvious. And trying to figure that out is a very, very hard thing, and you need to have a lot of time to really do so. And that leads to people just not even wanting to engage, to believing propaganda or being very reactive instead of proactive and only really doing things when things get bad. And this has been something that not only is in Canada, but around the world. I want PeoPoli to be a non-partisan entry point that allows people to explore politics and civics and learn about that in a very interactive environment that reflects their choices and seeing how different things affect people, not on a national, or not necessarily on a fully national level, but on a social level that is relevant to them, so that it's not seen as something that's too high for them to understand. And it gets them very excited, I would say interested about the political process and civic life. And through this, it provides a medium that politics can be made more engaging, because, like I said, it's very hard to get more into politics. It's very inaccessible, and I want to make something that allows it to be engaging through our own agency, so that we have a vested interest in understanding what is going on. I also want to inspire understanding and conversation, because I find that a lot of people don't know how to talk about politics and civic subjects. We weren't taught, and it becomes very problematic. It leads to a lot of the flame wars. I'm sure we're all know on the internet and even in real life, and arguments. And we want to have a way that allows us to better have a civic conversation. And through this game, I hope that the experience allows them to be more educated on these sort of issues, to have a better understanding, and allow them to have a better conversation with people around them about, even if they disagree. And to address the voter turnout rate that I was talking about earlier, these are just some pie charts of some research that I did about the voter turnout. In 2011, youth, which is 18 to 24, which is by far the lowest turnout rate in the country and commonly around in the West. The youth voter rate in 2011 was about 39%. That did increase the next election, but not by too much. And so youth, who are the future, who they're going to inherit our countries and our world, their voices are getting stifled because they are not engaged in politics, and they are not voting, and they're not voicing their concerns, not voicing their concerns come election time. And when it comes to the overall voter turnout, when we think of the voter turnout in 2015, that one was only 66% of all registered Canadians, and we have a huge portion of here which could have meant the same outcome, or it could have meant a different outcome, but their voices were not heard. And that becomes a problem because even with the recent election a few months ago, that rate of 66% was around the same. It didn't move much, if at all. And when we think about other countries, for example, the American election, the 2016 election, which resulted in what I call the garbage fire down south, they only had a 58% voter engagement rate overall, as far as my research could tell. We want, especially a lot of youth, we want them to be engaged in politics because right now they're the lowest demographic, and if this does not change, what's going to happen when the highest demographic, which is the older generation, dies off? Who's going to be choosing and voting then? It's important. It's a very important issue to me that people become more educated when it comes to voting. But the also question I get asked a lot when I talk about this tournament is, why video games? Why would I make a video game? Why don't I just make a documentary and call it a day? And it's for a few reasons that I've talked about, but we'll go over them, which is that video games allow us to get to learn through experience. We have player agency. We become part of the media rather than observing it. And because of that, we are immersed in the project and become part of the work. We are driven by the story and driven by our actions through the interactive systems that are expressed and used in our interactions. And these mechanics can be very expressive on whatever topic you want to go through, whatever through interactive conversations, through different game mechanics, through different story sections, many different ways in order to express different information and context through the game and have it changed and affected by player actions and inputs. There is a study by a researcher who I'm a fan of called, I can't remember the first names, but their last names are Karu and Kova. And when it comes to interactive systems, they have there's a common process that involves nesting, where they get themselves situated in an interactive experience, be it games or anything else, even shopping. Investigation, where they search through things and start to experiment with things to see what happens when they do something, and the stamping process, which the stamping process essentially is how did they think about the experience afterwards? What do they remember about it? What is the thing that lingers in their mind when it's all over? And when it comes to game through social change, that is a very, very important thing. Games. So many different behaviors, which I will go into an example in a little bit, can be promoted through video games and how we interact with them, such as teamwork or conflict resolution or different other things. And when it comes to behaviors, some of which are toxic and already being the social change already being expressed through games and other systems, in that way where they cause social change in a not so great way, I think that why don't we think about making a way that can be more positive and more positive and expressive, and sometimes even nonviolent. That could also express a lot of that stuff.
Jordan,
yeah.
We're almost at time.
Okay.
I want to make sure that there's time left over for people to ask questions.
All right, we'll speed it up.
Is there like a final slide you want to run through?
Almost. Okay, I'll just go through.
There'll be time afterwards for people to come and chat with you as well, and do like a more focused breakout group.
All right, I'll just speed it up. But another reason I want to do games is because games bring us together. We talk about different we come together. We talk about our experiences. We have different experiences through the way we interact with it, and it can inspire people. These are from events that I've shown my games at, but it can also go on a way bigger scale. Anybody know what this is, or where this is?
Tower?
CN Tower, and you know why all these people are here?
Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go. This was the launch day of Pokemon Go in Canada. I was there, and there are all these people just playing Pokemon Go together and talking and interacting with each other. I don't consider Pokemon and Pokemon Go to be a game for social change, but the culture around it has definitely inspired a lot of change in how we relate to media, technology, as well as collaboration, teamwork, and research. So I'll skip over this, but I have a lot of goals with PeoPoli and how it can change our behavior and inspire higher civic engagement. And I also think that when it comes to creating a responsible game for social change, that there is some principles we need to follow. We have to make sure that it's driven by research, that we don't just make it on personal opinion, and that we allow players to engage with the issues in not necessarily a fun way, but in an engaging way that allows us to really start talking about these issues, as well as think about them after we're all done. Now, one last thing which I do want, one last thing is, this is the info page about the last federal election a few months ago, where you're able to see everybody's different platform on specific issues. But it's very wordy and kind of confusing and also kind of intimidating. And why can't we learn how to design a better way to read this? Why can't we turn this into this? Why can't we make easier ways for us to access and understand political information? Why can't we make a glossary that is easily available for us to learn the jargon that can make it very confusing? And I consider that possibility in making a system. So for PeoPoli to be transported to mobile by using the point and click system that easily works on devices such as that. And so, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do think that interactive civic systems, both in games and as well as in other ways, are very important and allows for a lot of innovation and very interesting ways for us to interact with and engage people and allow them to become better, more civically minded citizens and more politically literate. And so I end with the question: can interactive experiences and systems become catalysts for social change? Well, I leave that up to you and seeing what that means to you. Thank you guys for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Thanks so much, Jordan. I think we can do about like a minute for maybe like 3 questions, if anyone's got any questions for Jordan. I'll let you gather your thoughts.
Yes, in the back.
Okay, I love how radical your premise is that games are art. So I want to ask you a question. Would you consider Sudoku art then?
Absolutely.
And would you consider gamers artists?
When it comes to, so the first question, Sudoku absolutely can be art. I mean, there is a lot of art and technical expertise required both to make that sort of thing, as well as the number system that is required to play it. It can be an entire mess of numbers that are. It can have a very artistic sort of value into it. I'm very bad at Sudoku, so I don't play it very much, but I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it as a game. When it comes to gamers, now it depends on what you mean. When it comes to game developers, absolutely. When it comes to gamers, it depends on if the only thing they're doing is consuming. Because if they're only consuming it, they are participating in the arts, but they are not necessarily artists in the regular sense because they aren't necessarily creating. But when it comes to the culture that the game are inspired for the gamers, how they react because of it. Maybe they make art, maybe they make different things, maybe that inspires them to do certain things. I do believe that there's an argument to be had about whether or not that makes them an artist after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
How do you decide like in PeoPoli, how do you decide what the effects of the players' decisions are on society? Like research or talking to people? Like how do you decide?
The game allows you to have different types of interactive choice. So for example, you can have different conversations, you can do a certain thing. There's a system where you have to manage your time because you don't have enough time to look through every piece of information, so you only can do a certain amount of things, and then the game will just pull you towards the other direction because you have to go do something else. There's many different ways in order to facilitate that sort of expression and interaction. I like interactive conversations probably the most. The player is essentially driven by point-and-click systems and conversations that they have with other people. They're to see how their decisions and also other events in the story affect those characters and themselves.
One last question.
Anything else? Yes.
Can you give an example of the type of, or like the aspects of civics and politics that you want to educate through your game?
Yes, I would like people to be more media literate, so that they don't always, for example, take every news story at face value or every claim by a politician at face value, and actually have a better understanding of how do I research that. A lot of the game is there's many portions of the game where you essentially are, for example, in your apartment, sitting on the couch, you turn on the TV, it says the news. Maybe you want to see other stuff about it, you look it up on your computer. Maybe you want to see how other people are reacting to it, let's look it up on Twitter. And many other different ways that people react and have a social sort of reaction to different sort of events, as well as the player's actions. The game is actually meant to take place over 8 levels. Each level, it's a typical Canadian election, takes place over maybe around 2 months. That every level would be a week into the campaign, and you'd see how things would change from week to week.
Excellent. And Jordan, will you be around for the rest of the evening if people have more questions?
Yes,
or
Yes, I will.
dig into the game a little bit more with you?
Yes, absolutely. And if anybody wants, I have business cards. You are free to take some. I'll be around for the next little bit. So if you guys have any questions or just want to talk and hang out, I'm game. So yeah.
Pun intended?
Not